Cool. So I mean, I thought we had a really great range of presentations here, but I felt like the downside of that is just how overwhelming the amount of information we got was. So what I'd like to start by asking the kind of panelists is, if you were going to pick like the few innovations that had shown the most value in retail, like if we take this 80-20 idea, what are the 20% of innovations that have happened inside retail that have given us 80% of the value? So Chandan, if you could.
So the true innovations that from a retail standpoint for us particularly is mobile. I mean the fact mobile internet or anything to do with your smartphone, the apps that you can have on your smartphone and the way you can consume information in your smartphone. Because what it meant now was that we could significantly reduce the consideration cycle of a person buying a product down from perhaps a day to a few hours, and now down to a few minutes on the train to work. Right, so a person can look at a particular dress they want and within a few minutes make a choice whether they want to buy it or not. Of course, it is a double-edged sword. They could choose not to buy it, in which case the next big innovation that comes behind that is the big data capability and the ability to use digital channels to retarget them and bring them back again.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. John, what do you think?
Yeah, similar around smartphones, but I guess a slightly different angle is around now that it's opened up a communication channel from the customer back to the retailers. So now I could potentially maybe walk into a retailer and say, I'm really hoping to see the new Frozen Advent calendar coming up, and maybe somebody somewhere in that retailer can see that, potentially have the opportunity to come and greet me. So it's that real two-way communication piece.
And maybe Simon, you could.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what's hot right now and going to be great is a slightly different question to what's actually had the most impact in the last few years. That's been really useful, and I think democratizing the ability to make predictions is really at the heart of what's really opening up for people. It used to be something that, like, my grandfather was an operational research scientist, and nobody would understand what he said. Whereas nowadays we can all have a conversation about predictive modelling. So I think that's brought it into the user base, into the business users' hands. I think going forwards, it's about the fact that when you buy a product, you almost want the digital version of it. I was at an event recently, and they were talking about a Hot Wheels car that you sell to children, but actually they expect some sort of QR code or equivalent to say, how do I drive it? With my digital kind of mobile. So I think that's where it's going. You almost have this blur of digital and physical.
And so what would you put down as the driving forces behind this democratization? Like, is that tools or is that understanding?
Who went to the high street and bought flight tickets? Nobody does. So things are more consumerized, and that's going into business. My marketing plan should be as easy to get as my plane tickets. And so I think people are just expecting much, much more from application developers. Like you've said, they're expecting better services from anyone selling to them.
Cool. So actually, just from the audience, how many people here are directly involved in retail? Can you put your hands up?
Usually have questions then.
Yeah, okay. So I guess then one thing we want to think about for the rest of the audience is retail has often, led the way in what's going on in data science. What would you say are the most transferable things that can be learnt by other industries? So maybe, Chandan, you could.
Is this from a data science point of view particularly?
Yeah, I think so.
So the thing is that even though we look at retail as the pioneers of some of these data science techniques, it's not actually true, because other industries have been doing data science, they just don't call it that. Right, but what is really transferable is the way in which you look at a customer and the way in which you look at your product. Right, that hasn't changed no matter what industry you're in. Right, it's about getting more insight about your customer in whatever level it may be. It could be a B2C sort of a customer, it even could be a B2B customer. But really what it is about trying to almost create a two axes. One is where you can place your customer on a value line, saying how valuable this customer is to me. And the other is place the customer on an engagement line, how engaged this customer is with my brand, whatever industry it may be. And then if you were to plot your customer, obviously the ones on the top right are the ones you want to keep, and everyone else you want to push to the top right. So this is not new. We've been doing it for a long time. The other dimension that we add to this is the product dimension. We almost draw it a separate axis and say, what sort of products and how does my product interact with the customer? And what can I do about that? What can I do about presenting the right product at the right time to the right customer in the right way? And this knowledge, the retailers have been the ones who have synthesized down to almost a science, which is quite transferable to other industries.
How should people learn about this stuff?
It's through experimentation. A lot of this, there is no silver bullet. I mean, I wish there was. I'd probably patent it, but there is no silver bullet. It's about experimentation. It's about seeing what's right for your business. And every incremental pound that you spend on it doesn't mean you'll get that incremental value back. So it's all about looking at what's giving me the best return on my investment and try to go down that route as fast as possible.
So John, could you speak to that as well?
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of how it's transferable, I guess, to other industries, it's more this mindset change, really. Like the CEOs or whatever, they know that the data's out there now, and even just the people these days, they expect almost just simply a better service from all walks of life now, all the sectors that they come across, from the experiences that they probably get, say, classically from Amazon online. They want to see that in store. And then if you take that to another industry, such as the service industry, all of a sudden I walk into a restaurant and I want to be able to order my food instantly. As I walk into a McDonald's, I can order the food straight away, or they know exactly what I'm going to order already. And again, back to the smartphone, that is the link that just takes that consumer straight back to the retailers or to the businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say the transferable piece is, as I mentioned before, it's this idea that we're consumerizing business now. The retailers have been consumerizing their service for a while. We've all experienced it, and we're now seeing that consumerized experience in the workplace. And we're, not just retailers, but you can transfer that idea of the customer and the 360 so strongly within business, even if it's inter-department or within an industry, within a company itself. So I just think, customer insight, 360. Consumerizing the applications, that whole influence that retailers are so pushing, that is transferable and actually makes it a better place to work. We enjoy our job more if it's made easier. We're not having to press F2 anymore. And that comes from the retail experience.
And is this written down? I guess so let's say you're not in retail, you want to get into this, where should people start? Like, what books can they read? What documentaries can they watch? I don't know.
Just go and build an app.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if a 9-year-old can do it in 3 hours, I'm sure the rest of you can. Go and give it a go, because the technology's there. It's just about actually, that'd be my take. I mean, just get on with it.
So often in conferences, people only present the things that went well. But I find, at least in my experience, I learn as much from the times it goes wrong as the times it goes well. So can you tell us about something that's gone wrong, like a failure in data science, so people can get, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, this isn't an all-powerful magical solution, right? We know that. So where are the limitations? Where have people tried too hard, pushed too far, and it hasn't worked?
So for every successful story you have in data science, there are about at least 9 to 10 failures behind it, literally. So for us, for example, the video that you saw, the personalized sort order, where as the person is browsing the website, the products get rearranged. It took us many iterations to get to that point. And every iteration that we looked at, we tried to validate the performance. So initially, our performance was deplorable. It was, in fact, we were losing revenue by adding this personalization piece. It came to a point where it was almost a death for this particular piece of technology. It almost came to a point that it's absolutely adding no value whatsoever. Why are we even doing this, right? But then there was a silver lining. Suddenly we started seeing results that are positive. What it meant was that now we know which areas to focus on and which way to go, and we start building the positive story. We run 100 experiments a month. Out of those 100 experiments, only 1/3 of them are successful. The other 2/3 are failures. They either show a decrease in performance or they are flat. Right, we don't talk about them, obviously. We all like success stories. But the fact is that the idea is fail fast, and learn quickly. That is the moral. If you set out not to fail, then you're failing to experiment. You're failing to push the boundaries. So you have to start out with the mindset that I am going to fail. Yes, I will accept that. But what I will do is I will fail as soon as I can, and I will iterate very quickly to a success story.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's almost the infamous story. I think it's, I don't know if I should say that, I think it's Target, I think in the US, about where all of a sudden they've got all of this great transactional data about their customers, they know exactly what they're buying or what that family's buying, right? I think you remember where this is going. And all of a sudden the father of the family gets something through about pregnancy. And you're like, why on earth has he got that? And it's because the daughter maybe has used the card and has bought something to do with that, to indicate it. And so Target, thinking they're being really personalised, have obviously sent them this information, and it's just an absolute sort of PR disaster. And I guess this might go on to like almost the machine learning type side of things, is that it can obviously take you a very long way into understanding your customers, but there's always going to be room for humans to kind of just have a sense check and just make sure that what you're doing is actually kind of acceptable.
Yeah, I think I'd probably relate to an experience which was a UK company, they're actually turning over a few billion, pretty big, and did a bit of work with them about predicting who's going to leave the organisation, looking at HR data. And once you take out the obvious kind of candidates, like those who've passed away or are pregnant or whatever it might be, you kind of clean the data up a bit. You end up with some data. And the data scientists are feeling really good about themselves, so that's great. But actually, you take it back to the business and they say, well, that doesn't mean anything to us. There's a big gap there. And I think I wouldn't say failure, but the thing to be aware of, I suppose, is looking at data, it can only take you so far. You've still got to have a really strong understanding of the business and the use case. And actually, that department went through a merger and acquisition. That's obviously going to throw the data. And actually, that closeness, I think, is something that can bring projects down. Data scientists can go away and do some really fabulous stuff, but maybe miss the obvious things that somebody who doesn't know technology at all will sit there and go, well, yeah, but obviously that. And I think I've probably been tripped up a few times, just making sure that there's that communication.
Cool. So I think we'll do a few audience questions. So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask the panel? Yeah.
We've all talked a bit about privacy and everything else, and I think you mentioned that specifically acceptable use of data.
Sorry. How does the panel feel about the definition of the acceptable use of data, as obviously the accessibility and use of data continues to become more and more the customer's control rather than the retailer's control?
Yeah, so it's all around the acceptability of data and who defines that. I guess ultimately it's down to the people, and public opinion can define it, and then as EU directives come out in a couple of years' time around that, and I think if I'm a retailer, I'm always going to want to err on the side of caution, just because of anything that can happen. Daily Mail gets hold of a headline and it can just completely ruin your business, where what you're doing is actually absolutely fine. If you boys want to...
So I can jump in. So the way we look at it is about being open about what you're doing with someone's data, right? At the end of the day, you're a trustee of the data. You don't own their data, they own it, right? So the customer owns it. So as a trustee of your data, it's about being open and obvious about what you're doing with it, and more important, getting consent to do some of these things. So personalization, some people like it. It's a good thing. It helps me go and I'm a sniper shopper. I just go and I say, I want that and I get it. Other people are browsers who perhaps personalization doesn't work for them. So the idea is to try to give the customer value. I'm certainly a believer that if you give a customer enough value for their data, they will implicitly understand that value exchange and be happy for you to use their data. We as an organization try to be open about this as much as we can.
You want?
Yeah, I would echo exactly that. I think it's a trade. I think we're all happy to give things away if we get more back. And as long as we leave feeling that, then, it's fair. I think, if it was your grandmother's data, would you do it? Kind of, there's a common sense to it as well, but, just take the high level. But I think if there's that trade and people understand how it's going to be used ahead of it being used, I think that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, so I was just going to say the main thing it just boils down to is consent from your customers. If they give you the permission to do it, then go for it. And if they're expecting such a personalised, tailored experience without giving you consent, then you've got this conflict.
So how do you guys feel the likelihood? So I don't know if you were in the talk this morning by the Economist data editor. He was talking about companies opening up their data and kind of this marketplace where if we all throw our data in, we're all going to be better off. So you're echoing, like, you know, people should open their data up. Do you think your companies will?
Well, see, I spent a year before ShopDirect working with the Digital Catapult to solve this very problem. The problem was closed organizational data. So the sum of the parts is much more than the parts itself. So the idea is McKinsey published a report saying that if organizations share the data, there's 800 billion worth of value to get out of it. But now, in retrospect, when I think about it, I look at it from my company point of view, from ShopDirect point of view, and I look at it and I go, hold on a minute, this is my crown jewels. Why would I want to share my crown jewels with the neighbor? Yes, it may be more valuable in the longer term, but in the shorter term, it's more valuable to me than it is to anybody else. Right? So I think there is a long-term view where data will become a commoditized thing, and there will be an open marketplace where consent and data is exchanged. But I don't see it happening in the near future. I just don't see it happening until one organization is saturated and squeezed all possible value they can get from their data before they share it outside.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually think it's already happening. I think you can't stop it. I think that where there is value in doing something, the human nature is to go and chase that down. And you know, 3 clauses can help slow that trend, but you're already seeing Telefonica basically sell out the ability to use that data with somebody else who sees value, and that will happen. And you know, you mentioned acquisitions. You know, I haven't got the data, I'm frustrated, I know there's value, I'll just buy them. And so I think it's already happening. I think whether it's happening with consent from the wider audience, again, you know, and to your point, as long as it's done in the right way, you know, there's nothing wrong with it, but I think that is already the state of play. Will it become the government, you know, democratized view and we'll all just rip the lid? No, it probably won't happen like that. But.
Cool, so another question? Yep.
The focus... Thank you. The focus very much has been on the use of big data within the business to consumer industry, part of sort of retail. Obviously, all the retail industry have thousands and thousands of suppliers. What is the industry actually sort of doing to utilise the concepts of big data with their third-party suppliers?
So I can answer this. So we work... we look at it on both sides, our suppliers as well. So we use big data on the operational efficiency side to look at our suppliers to try to understand a lot of things, not only just the supply chain, but also co-promotions that we can do with the suppliers on particular products, events that we can do with suppliers, projecting into the future issues that a supplier could have, and therefore additional lead times on a product. What can we do about it? So we look at it, the one thing we don't do is share our personal data with suppliers. We as a business have a policy that whatever personal data we collect, we will not share it, period. And that's simply because we have 84 years of history. We can track a household back to their great-grandparents, right? It's not right. We are not right to own that data, and it's not right certainly to share that data. So when it comes from a supplier point of view, we treat them as an external entity. We try to look at them as a dependency on a business, which they are, and we try to estimate things on that side, on the supply chain, on things that are happening with suppliers. We do provide them with insight on overall aggregated statistics of what happens with our business so that they can run their business better.
At Dunnhumby, we've got a very successful commercial model that actually, so we take, as Chandan said, we'll take the data and we'll never ever sell someone's personal details, but the behaviours that they're exhibiting and within that kind of segment level, we'll pass that back to a supplier. So Coca-Cola might know how many units that they've pushed out to Tesco for that given week. They can then learn from the data that we provide back to them, like what the profiles of those customers actually are, what type of things they're also buying with those products, so they can build up a much kind of rounded view of what their customers look like. And that's from a supplier point of view rather than a retailer point of view.
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
So this is about using it for logistics, as well as using the kind of data science tools for the logistics side, as well as the...
logistics. Sorry, I missed the question. Sorry.
Essentially, the question is what the retail industry is doing, how it's using big data for the third-party suppliers as opposed to...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't have direct experience other than to say that I think it's to everyone's advantage to collaborate, and that has to be a guided form. But I would say, I mean, I was at an event as part of the Institute for Turnarounds. Jaguar did a presentation. Head of supply chain was talking about Jaguar's supply chain and their relationship with their suppliers. And I think intrinsic in that value-add proposition is the idea of actually sharing. So I think suppliers should try and find a way to trade with companies to make it more appetising for them to do it. But obviously in certain places it's easier to do that than others maybe.
Cool. Another question? Yeah.
Coming back to the point earlier about how other sectors can learn from retail, as someone not in retail, we talked a little bit earlier about categorizing customers by their value to you as a business. One of the questions we've been struggling with is how do you categorize the value of a customer when you don't know, you've only just met them. So they've perhaps transacted with us once, or they've signed up once and not even transacted yet. What learnings do you guys have from that in the retail space that other industries can learn from when we're early in that journey?
So I can talk about the B2C space. It's a bit easier when you're talking to a customer, because what you can do is you can drop a customer into a segment. So the segment can be based on things you already know about the customer, like for example demographics or geographic location, the channel they came by. And based on that segment, then you can use that segment to see what's the aggregate value of that segment and assign that to a customer. That's the simplest of things that you can do. If you're a B2B pitch, then it's completely different. Then you're talking about how big is this company that, am I talking to an Oracle or am I talking to somebody else who's much smaller, right? And then it's a whole different ball game in that case. The value then is not just about the customer value, it's about future potential value that you can do based on the products you potentially sell to them. So there's no short answer.
How accurate do you think you can get from these segmentations when you just first touch a customer?
So the thing is not about getting accurate, right? You start with not getting accurate. You start with being able to do it. That's the number one thing. You're able to get a value. It doesn't have to be accurate. If you can do that, that's a big tick box. Because the next time they land on your site, you can become more accurate. So you don't start with being accurate on day one. You start with being able to put them into a bucket that it's good enough. Right? And then when they start engaging with your brand more and more, then you can start moving them and becoming more accurate. Because in most cases, you don't have to be accurate on day one. People don't expect to have, the moment I walk into a store, have the most personalized experience, right? It's like going to your local cafe. The first day you go and order a coffee, they don't know who you are. You tell them I want a latte with a little bit of hazelnut and 3 shots of espresso. You do that 7 times and then you're a favorite. They know exactly the moment you walk into there, your coffee is ready. It's the same philosophy online, right? You come to a website, you don't expect to have the super personalized experience. But if you've shopped there 7 times, then yes, you better damn well get our act together to be more personalized to them.
I could probably pick that up from a B2B perspective, which is more where my background lies, in terms of if you consider your business and the business plan and your target markets and your objectives, they all are essentially somehow made up of variables and levers. And so I would be looking to embed those into your operational business. So when that lead lands, you're not just doing lead scoring and profiling and ranking, but you're actually doing the same for your accounts and your contacts and actually the opportunities, and then driving behaviour like the commissions I mentioned earlier about that. So however small that data is, like we said there, we can add more data to that, and then just start to score it as hard as you can. And then it's about how you use your own resource. And again, just try and automate that process, because the problem is spending a lot of time on that might be a complete waste of time because it has no value at all because you only got a snippet. So automation would be the thing I'd look for there, is to say build in the variables into the system and then automate it so it becomes, it doesn't hit your cost of sale.
Yeah, well, I guess the key thing is that they've come to you once. It means you've got some engagement with them already. Rather than just doing like a blanket marketing exercise where you might get like 5% back, this person has shown some interest into you. So now it's the right time to show some interest back to them, and then try and build them into a much sort of better prospect over time.
Cool. So I'd like to just finish by asking one more question. What do you guys think is the most exciting thing in this kind of space over the next, say, 3 years?
I think it's the Internet of Things and what's going to happen with that. I'm quite excited to see it because now we have almost like pockets of communities around Internet of Things. They are mostly industrial, some of them are retail, some of them are in the healthcare space. I'm quite interested to see when we do have the Internet of Everything and everything communicates with each other. What can we do with that? How can we harness that in various industries where, let's say, a retail industry works all the way with the utilities provider or something, right? It's a brave new world when we have all that data in one place.
It's a big ask for 3 years. What do you guys think?
I think probably the most exciting thing, I think it's more around the fact that I'm going to completely dodge the question. However exciting it's going to be, is that we're going to have just to be very mindful of what, like, sort of more the government and the policies around that are saying around, you know, end-to-end encryption should be banned or whatever. Is that we just need to take into account before we can kind of just go off and do it. Is just really understand if we're allowed to, and kind of the public opinion is one of the more. So governance is the most exciting thing that's going to come out in the next 2 years. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that is exciting.
Very practical answer.
Falling off my chair.
I'd say the most exciting thing is you put everything we've talked about today in the hands of the mid-market and the small guys, and you wait to see what they can do with it. Because I think that's where you're really going to see some really exciting stuff come out. When the websites that you guys are building, which are absolutely fabulous, if I can go on and just have one of those, please, you know, that's when some really exciting stuff's going to happen.
So are we out of time, or have we got time for one more audience question?
Yes, one more.
Okay, let's do one right at the back there.
Okay.
This is to do with question of ethics and data privacy. I can use this now. Essentially, I have come across a report in August that NHS is going to give the entire medical records to the likes of Tesco's, Boots, and Superdrugs. Can the panel give your comments on how does data privacy come into play there, as well as the ethics side of doing business? I don't want my record, without my knowledge, these records are being given to the retail industry.
So, when it comes to ethics, there are two sides of it. There's the legal obligation that you've got to follow from the regulators, right? But I personally believe it doesn't stop there. There is a moral obligation as well. So even if you're within your bounds legally as an organization to consume certain sets of data, as an organization, it's for you to make a judgment call whether that's a moral thing to do or not. And we as an organization pride ourselves that we try to make those moral calls beyond what's legally required by us. And one of the things is not sharing our data with anybody else, and so on and so forth, right? So the short answer is, yes, we are very cognizant of privacy concerns. We are very cognizant of emotional concerns, and certainly are very cognizant of moral limitations that we as human beings have on consuming certain people's data. However, the other side of it is there are a whole set of hackers that don't believe in all of that. So we try to spend a large amount of money to protect the data that we own. All right, so we invest in world-class technology solutions to make sure that even though we have those moral limitations, somebody who doesn't have it cannot get access to that data.
Also has some business benefits.
And also has business benefits.
One more question. I think Nick trying to
sorry.
raise the hand several times.
Go for it.
It was really just, we've talked a lot about personalisation. It was just, is there a risk of over-personalisation? It strikes me we're possibly leading consumers down increasingly narrow paths. And do you think there's a role for a randomness, as it were? We talked about the browsing in a physical shop is very different to the experience online. And, is there learnings from the physical world that we can take into the digital?
So I'll give you two answers for this. One of them is a more theoretical answer. that whatever we do in all personalization, we try to add the aspects of diversity, novelty, and serendipity into it to a certain degree, right? So we try to say, if we are a department store, we are not a single category store. So if a person buys, let's say, clothing, can we make them look at the other part of the store as well? So that's the diversity aspect. Can we make them see new things that have come in? And can we randomly throw something in that's completely serendipitous? So that's the theoretical answer. But the more practical thing is that we have seen examples that if we over-personalize, let's say through an email channel, and a user unsubscribes, they are gone forever. They are gone forever. We're never going to be able to communicate with them or personalize or do anything with them again. Right? So we are very cognizant of that fact that if we over-personalize, if you over-push things into people when they don't want it, they have a high probability of just saying, no, I give up. This is just annoying. I'm going away. Right? And that, from a practical point of view, is more important than all the theoretical aspects, because once we lose the right to communicate with our customers, it's gone. We're not getting it back.
Yeah, it's just this balance between sort of like personalisation and creepy. So if I go and see a friend that I haven't seen for a couple of months, and hey, did you enjoy the football match that I saw you were at on Facebook? I feel like that whole kind of something's been lost. In terms of it's just got to be governed properly, right? But the personalisation is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But you just got to work. You've got to make sure that it's the right thing. And you're talking about how you can take something physical store online. Absolutely, if you can see what people are buying, what things they're buying together, you can then make the experience a bit more personal online by saying, hey, check this out. Somebody else bought that, and you can apply those learnings quite easily.
I think two things really. B2C or B2B is about as personal as 1920, and we've got a long way to go. B2C, I think actually, if it becomes annoying, we've probably got it wrong. So I don't think there is any end point to being personal, but it probably gets harder the closer you get to the long tail.
Cool. Well, if you could all join me in thanking the panelists for everything they've told us.